Switching gears right now, going to briefly give a review of Samson, the new Pure Flix movie. Joe did not see this, so this will be a solo review on my behalf. Samson, directed by Bruce McDonald from Pure Flix, okay? Pure Flix, if you don't know, I review all these Christian movies. They had an okay last year because they had the case for a few movies come out, as well as God's Not Dead 2, so they had quite a few movies in their favor last year. So they've found, Pure Flix's model has really found a lot of success with these kind of movies, okay? Since their inception, they focused a lot on these contemporary parables for modern audiences with really intensely Christian themes and a good sense of morally good characters, okay? Samson, on the other hand, is different, okay? It shows that Pure Flix has at least some interest in breaking the mold by dramatizing historical stories with biblical audience, okay? I said in my review, which you can... That's their attempt to try to broaden their audience, okay? I said... my review, which you can read at stevethemovieman.proboards.com. I said you probably couldn't buy a non-believer's ticket for them to go see God's Not Dead, A Light in Darkness next month, but you might, with any luck, get them to watch Samson on a rainy Sunday afternoon. And at least Pure Flix is the one that has faith here, okay? The movie Samson, though, is divided into two sections, okay? If you know the story of Samson, this really is going to come as a surprise. I didn't know the story of Samson, so this was a little bit of a revelation for me, if you will. The first part of the film is set in 1170 BC Gaza, and the Hebrew community is enslaved by the Philistines, led by King Balak, played by Billy Zane, and as well as Prince Rala, played by Jackson Rathbone, who does a great job acting. I'll talk about him in a minute. The Jews are led by Samson, played by Taylor James, who's a judge of God, who was told by God himself that he would lead his people to freedom one day by the way of his godlike strength, and he would keep his strength so long as he forfeited drinking alcohol, touching the dead, and cutting his hair. So he'll keep his strength, but he himself, he's very humble in a way. He doesn't want to own this responsibility that he's been given. So he kind of operates on the outskirts. He winds up marrying a Philistine woman named Taryn, played by Frances Schloto Douglas, who is a slave to Prince Rala. And then in a retaliation to Prince Rala's evil actions, Samson winds up slaughtering hundreds of Philistine soldiers with nothing but the jawbone of an ass as his weapon. So then following that, the second half of the movie takes place many years later, and I quote, many years later, where Samson leads the still enslaved Hebrews who are now starving due to political injustices against them. So he winds up trying to lead a rebellion against King Balak by way of like a peace treaty. He winds up being seduced by Delilah, played by Caitlin Delilah is nothing more than a Philistine mole who has the goal of expelling Samson's powers by getting him to, getting him to commit the last of one of those three no-nos, if you will, that I just mentioned earlier, that in order to keep his strength. So that's kind of what the film focuses on here, all right? Now I'm going to say this. The acting in this movie is a lot better than people are giving it credit for. A lot better. Especially given the fact that this is a movie that has very dramatic emotions and a lot of moments where everything sort of subsides in a way for the characters to express very agonizing emotions. Like, case in point, I'm trying to articulate this. There's a lot of moments when Samson has to really show this passionate display of emotions. And while it's corny, it's definitely not easy for an actor to be able to commit to that, okay? And Taylor James does an adequate job at doing it, I would say. He can command the screen when he's given. At first, I looked at him, I'm like, this guy looks like a Taylor Lautner pretty boy. But at the same time, he's pretty good. The real performance here, I was going to say, comes from Jackson Rathbone, who plays Prince Rala. He's great. Rathbone was a background actor in Twilight, but he's very good here. He's very sinister. A lot of good moments from him as well. Frances Schloto Douglas doesn't get a lot of screen time here as Taryn, but she's pretty good too, as well as Caitlin Leahy doesn't get a ton either. The female characters in this movie, which is odd because the story is commonly known as Samson and Delilah, they don't get a lot of screen time here, but they're good for what they do. I did like this movie a lot more than a lot of Pure Flix's recent efforts. Was not a fan of the Case for Christ. Wasn't the biggest fan of Woodlawn either with a lot of people. But God's Not Dead films, I was a bigger defender of the first movie than a lot of people. But the second film was awful. But Samson, though, is different. And I would love to see Pure Flix continue with this. I absolutely would. I would love to see Pure Flix continue with this model of adapting these historical stories, okay? And keep in mind, too, this is not a $200 million Black Panther level production. This is a very meagerly budgeted, conservatively budgeted movie. And I think it works pretty well. I think the visuals are interesting. It reminds me a lot of like a Cecil B. DeMille 70s religious epic in a lot of ways visually. I think it recalls a lot of that. Some great shot on location footage of South Africa where this film was made. I think it looks good. I think that there's a couple instances where the movie does get bogged down by a third act, which I think because it struggles to kind of summarize the actions of its main characters in a way, it sort of becomes repetitive in a certain form. So I don't think that loans to it really well as well, just because of the fact that I think motivations kind of get cloudier as it goes on. That they don't become as obvious as it was communicated to us early. And then I would say that there is a theatrical and sentimental element to it, but at the same time, every emotion, whether it's triumphant or distraught or prideful, whatever, is embellished by like a very overbearing score and like dramatic camera work. There are some instances where like between Taryn and Samson and Prince Rala where like that it kind of becomes obvious, or a distraction, but like the tonal obviousness I think works for this, especially these biblical epics. I think if you're going to be sentimental, if you're going to be really overblown, I think these epics are where to. And I think that like it really captures the emotion, and I find that to be, especially when these movies are thought to be like teachable in a way, I think it works. I think it works here more often than it doesn't. Overall, I think Samson is a really likable movie in a lot of ways. I think it's an effective change of pace for Pure Flix. I would love to see them do this, more of these movies, but like I said, after the way that this performed in the box office, I don't foresee it happening. I think that they took this risk. It didn't, result in the dividends. We'll get God's Not Dead 4 and 5 in the next 3-4 years to make up for it. But I give Samson 2.5 out of 4 stars. I think it's a decent movie. I wouldn't advise against seeing it. I wouldn't mind watching it again. That's the first religious movie in quite some time that I'll say that. It's good. It's not going to be in theaters for very long. I would recommend it. Even if you're not a fan of these religious movies, there's something here I think to appreciate, and it doesn't give you that sort of bad laugh aesthetic or that bad laugh kind of content you've come to associate Pure Flix with. Solid 2.5 out of 4 stars for Samson. I did enjoy this more than I think a lot of people did. I was
a surprise.
Because again, if anybody's been hard on Pure Flix, it's me. But the other thing too is you got to remember,
you got hate for it too.
I've gotten hate for it. You know that. I'll tell you too is like I have seen. Like, this is the other thing too is like people. I know there's been horrible reviews of this online and stuff. Here's the thing, and I'm not trying to say my opinion's better. But I've looked. The last 9 movies released by Pure Flix, including Samson, I've seen 8 in theaters. I've seen 8, period. So, like, it's...
You've seen them when at their worst.
I've seen them. I've seen worse. Believe me, a year ago at this time, I was talking about Slamma-Jamma, which is still a disgrace. And I have seen bad movies of this genre.
That trailer just, ugh.
I mean, yes. I have seen awful movies of this genre, okay? I have seen this at their worst. I'm just saying right now, there's good in this movie, and there's something to be praised